What's up, guys? This is Kevin Jones, one of the members of the Build Guild. I'm excited to talk to you guys today about Scaffold-ETH. And we're going to teach you how to use Scaffold-ETH to set up a project quickly, get prototyping, build a dApps super easily with Scaffold-ETH. Without further ado, let's dive right into it and get started. All right. Okay, so when you first get started, you're going to want to go to scaffold-eth.io. So scaffold-eth.io is going to be like the main entry point. It's going to show you how to either clone the repository or use the npx command with create ETH to grab the latest version that's available there and then deploy this inside of your localhost environment. And so there's also a link to the docs, and then there's a link to the GitHub repo as well. So if you want to check out the README there. But let's just get started. Let's start building. Okay, cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the npx command. So we're going to do npx create -eth at latest. And what this is going to do is it's going to go fetch the newest version. If you don't have it installed, it's going to ask you to install it. You say yes. Then it's going to ask you what you want to name your project. So we're going to say WaveHack, right? And hit enter. Then it's going to ask you if you want to use Hardhat or Foundry. So I like Hardhat because it's just been a little bit more tested, and it's just what I'm used to. I like to write my tests in Hardhat. If you want to write Solidity tests, Foundry might be a better option, and it's kind of a little bit newer. It might just be the newer cool thing that people are doing, but I like Hardhat. So then it's going to ask you if you want to install the packages. You go ahead and say yes. What this is going to do, it's going to set up a mono repo for you. So it's going to have the Hardhat or Foundry, then it's going to have Next.js, and then it's going to have a bunch of Yarn scripts that are already written for you to help you orchestrate. It's also going to create like kind of a scaffolded Git repository so that you could just throw that into Git really easily. So this is pretty quick. Just to install those dependencies, it might just take anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute to get you set up. So we'll just kind of wait for this. There we go. All right, cool. It's up and running. So now we can go into this WaveHack directory and we can do yarn chain. So yarn chain is going to spin up the chain that you chose. So if you chose Hardhat, it's going to spin it up with all of the accounts that come with Hardhat. I'm going to use a tool called Tmux, T-M-U-X, which just allows me to split my screen up. Everything you do in Scaffold-ETH requires a few screens. So you're going to need to have multiple windows. You could just open up multiple terminals, but just to kind of make it easy and make it easy to read, I'm just going to split these up into three. So we already have the chain running. The next command is to go into the WaveHack directory and do a yarn start. So yarn chain for the back end, yarn start for your front end. That's it. It's going to spin it up on localhost 3000. You're good and go. So then in this last window, we're going to go into the same directory and we're going to do a deploy. So yarn deploy and hit enter. So it's going to take a smart contract that comes with Scaffold-ETH and it's going to deploy it to your chain. And then it's going to do a couple things. It's going to tell you how much gas you're using. It's going to tell you, how much or what the initial greeting was, because we're doing some stuff with Hardhat console. And then we're also going to get all of the type definitions, TypeScript definitions for the contract, which is really useful. And I'll show you why in just a sec here. So first, let's just take a quick look at the repository. Okay, so I'm going to load this up in VS Code. And again, we'll see it's a mono repo. So it's got this package JSON, which has all of the yarn commands that we're going to be typing today. And then it's got the packages folder with two packages, Hardhat, Next.js. So for Hardhat, if you go in here, you're going to see there's a contracts folder. Okay, so we're going to focus on that first. The contracts folder has a contract called yourcontract.sol, and it's a very basic contract. It just has some variables that are defined. A string is the most important thing here, the greeting string. It also has like a Boolean, an unsigned integer, it has a mapping, and then we have like an event that gets emitted. Then we have a constructor argument that gets passed. We do some access control stuff where we actually set an owner for the contract, which we're going to mess with that in a little bit. We have a modifier that checks to see if a particular person calling the function is the owner, whether or not. But more importantly, we have this set greeting function, which allows us to update that greeting. So it's kind of like this hello world contract where you can change the greeting that people see when they first come to your app. And then if we go to this withdraw function, we can see that there's where we use that modifier, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So we could come in here and make a change to our app and then redeploy it. So we could say building cool apps, and let's save that. And then we could come over here and do a deploy again. Now it's going to detect that there's a new version of the contract and deploy it. If for some reason you want to force a contract to get redeployed, you can do -- reset, and that will always force a new contract to keep coming up, and you'll continue to get a new contract. What I want to show next is kind of the UI a little bit. So let's dive into that. So we're going to open up Scaffold-ETH, which is on port 3000 on localhost, and we're going to kind of see what Scaffold-ETH comes with. The first most important thing is that when you first load up Scaffold-ETH, you're going to notice here that you're going to get an environment set up with a burner wallet, and we'll get to that in a second. But this first page is kind of just a home page. It's kind of where you'll build your app out as you build out your front end. But this debug contracts is the really cool piece. So we can see here that we have our greeting that we have. We have the owner, which we set in the constructor. We have a premium that says whether or not someone paid value in the function to set that greeting. And then we have a counter that keeps track of the greetings. So we also have a read, which keeps track of how many times a particular address. That's the mapping that you see in the contract. And then we have this function to set it. So we could say like WaveHack, ! Hit send. It's going to tell us, well, we don't have enough gas to pay for the transaction. So again, you'll notice that we have this ability to sign transactions inside of Scaffold-ETH using a burner wallet, but we don't have any ETH in there. So there's a little button here on the top right. Just click that. That's going to give you 1 ETH from the faucet. Then we can just go ahead and hit send again, and then we can see that that was successful, and we can see that we were able to change the greeting to WaveHack. So pretty cool. And then we could also send some value there. So let's say we want to send, I don't know, 0.5 ETH, right? So you'd think you'd be able to just hit send, but we can't use big integers here. We need to basically there's no floating point math and solidity. We have to transact with Way. So there's this little button here where we'll do the calculation for us to convert what we want in ETH to Way. So we can tell instantly this is how much Way, that is half of an ETH. So we can send that, and then there we go. Now we can see that the Boolean went to true, total counter went to true, and we can see that we lost that ETH, right? We spent that half of the ETH plus some gas. So if I was to go copy address and look at the counter, we can read and see that I've changed that address twice. Now, if I go like file new incognito window and go to the same address, we'll get a completely new wallet. Now, this is really cool because then you can start kind of testing different functionality in your app, and you can go to the debug contracts folder, and then we could grab this address here and then take a look at the counter, and then we'll see that there is no value. We haven't sent any transactions on this address, but this one is coming back as 2. So really cool that you could just get these burner wallets and start kind of impersonating identities, right? So we're up and running. We've got our app running. We want to then kind of iterate on the contract a little bit. So let's do that. So we've kind of made this small little change, very minute. But what I would like to do is actually set up a proper access control. So I want to use OpenZeppelin for that. So if anyone hasn't heard of OpenZeppelin, it's contracts that are kind of trusted and widely used and audited and just kind of like standard for interacting with a contract. And so there is one called Ownable. So we're going to import that here. And then we're going to say that our contract is ownable like this. And we're going to wipe out this because we don't need that variable anymore. And we're going to wipe out the modifier because we don't need that anymore. We don't need to pass in an address anymore. We can also wipe out this modifier like this because that comes with ownable. And we can also get rid of this and replace it with only owner. So in this function, earlier we were using is owner, but the ownable is a only owner modifier. And then we're going to say, instead of owner, we're going to say message.sender.call. So basically, if someone calls this and they are the message sender, we're going to transfer all the balance from the contract into that wallet. So that's it. We just made a bunch of changes. Now, you think we could come over here and do a yarn deploy, and it should work, but we're going to get an error. And the reason why is because we're doing a hard hat deploy. If we were to look at the error here, we would see that we're trying to deploy a smart contract that requires no arguments, but we're actually still passing those arguments. So the next thing you'll need to know is that you want to go to the deploy script. So the deploy script is right below in the deploy folder, and there is a deploy your contract TypeScript. And you'll see here that this is where we basically set the rules for our deployment. So here's where we get the named accounts from Hardhat and set that as the deployer. and then we say who it came from, and then the arguments are being passed here. Well, we don't need these arguments anymore because part of the deployment is just to check, because Ownable will automatically deploy and find that whoever the deployer is coming from the from field on the deploy. So we can basically comment these out. We don't need them right now. You might want to pass other things in here, like if it's a ERC20, it would be like the supply maybe, or the token name, or if it's an NFT, it might be the URI for the metadata. There's lots of reasons why you need to pass that, but for right now, we'll comment it out. Then we can see here we do this deployment. So first of all, let's just save that and then see if we're able to deploy successfully. So we made some changes. There we go. So we were able to deploy. We can see everything should be working. So we can come back to our app now and see that we got a new contract. We can see that no longer there's an owner variable, but it's different. It's not what we had before. And it's basically the hard hat account. So that's very important to understand. So if we were to send some value into this contract, we would basically get lost at this point unless you had this private key. So what I want to show here is that we get some additional functions. Because we're inheriting Open Zeppelin with the import, we then get access to two new functions. So the renounce ownership and the transfer ownership. So this is useful because we might want to just throw away the ownership of the contract if we want it to just live immutable forever, or we might want to transfer that ownership to someone. So let's do that. Let's get the address of our burner wallet, which is here, and let's use this transfer ownership to transfer the contract from the deployer to us. So let's do that. So we can go to our deploy script, and what we can do is right below here, we can just add a wait, and we can call your contract dot transfer ownership, and then we can pass the address here. So we can just put that in quotes, and we can basically transfer ownership of the contract at the time that we deploy it. So we deploy it, then we transfer it. So we call that function. So if I come over here and do a yarn deploy dash reset, now we'll do the deploy and we'll transfer the contract into this other wallet. So now we have this owner variable that matches our burner wallet. So if we were to come here to the set greeting and say like, hey, here's some money, here's money, okay, and then we just send like, I don't know, 0.05 ETH, right, and can put it into Way, send that. Now the contract has some value right here. And if I want to come over to this kind of like new blocky dude over here, I have this 0x4089. If I come over to this one and try to withdraw the funds from this, let's just refresh. We can see there's some funds in there. If I try to hit withdraw, it's going to tell me, well, you're not the owner of this contract. But if I come over here and I hit withdraw, then it's going to let me successfully withdraw it because I have set up this kind of access control. So, that's pretty straightforward. You could make whatever changes you want to your contract at this point. If you wanted to set a variable or create new functions and new events, we'll just pretend that we're just wanting to show how you want to deploy and take your app to the next level. So everything we've been doing right now is all kind of local host, right? We're just kind of testing and iterating our contract. But then at some point, right, you need to publish this to a testnet. So what we want to do is we don't want to use the accounts that come with Hardhat, because Hardhat does come with those 20 accounts, but they're shared private keys. Everyone has those private keys. And anytime you go to a public testnet or mainnet, you don't want to use those private keys to do your deploy because you'll have to fund the account. And by the time you fund it and try to do the deploy, it will get withdrawn. So what we want to do is actually create a deployer. So we can do yarn run generate, or I think yarn generate will work as well. But what this is going to do is it's going to generate a private key, and then it's going to store that private key inside of your environment in an environment variable. So at this point, we have a new account that we can use to do the deploy. So then all we have to do is do yarn account to get that account. So in this case, we'll just kind of stop it because we know this is a brand new wallet, and we can kind of shrink this down a little bit. And if we have a wallet on your phone, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up Punk Wallet, which punkwallet.io is this kind of like burner wallet for your phone. You could use any phone, and I have some funds on there. So you can see here there's a Punk Wallet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit scan, and I'm going to scan this QR code, and I'm just going to send some ETH here. I'll just send 0.5 ETH, sure. Hit send. Oh, I only send 50 cents. So let's do that again, 0.5 and then click the little ETH and send that 0.5, send. Cool, there we go, successful, transaction sent. So let's try it again. So zoom back in and let's do a Yarn account again. So now I should have some funds on this deployer account because I funded it. There it goes. So we got a little bit of ETH. Actually, that's probably not the second transaction. So let's see if the second one goes through. At first, I just sent 50 cents on accident. It doesn't look like it's going through. Let's try it one more time. Could be that Sepolia is just a little slow right now. Okay, let me try to send it one more time. Oh, there it goes. I think it just went through. So you're an account. Here we go. There we go. So now I have 0.5 ETH on this deployer account. So now the only thing I need to do at this point is if I wanted to deploy to Sepolia, I could just do yarn deploy -- network Sepolia. It's going to take my contract, compile it if it needs to. We don't have any requirement to compile it because it hasn't changed, but it's going to create the transaction, submit it over. Obviously, it's a test net, so it's going to wait just a second to see if it gets mined. So this might take anywhere between 5 to 10 seconds. There we go. So we got our contract that was deployed, and we can see that stuff is working. So we have the address here. We can copy it. So let's do that, and then let's load up Sepolia Etherscan. And let's go to that contract address and let's see, what do we got? So it looks like it hasn't indexed it yet, but that's okay. We'll just give it a second. Sometimes Sepolia Etherscan is a little slow to show if it's indexed. What we'll do right now is just try to interact with it. So let's come back here. Now, we're still pointing our front end at localhost, hard hat. So the next thing we need to do is update our front end to point at Sepolia as well. So let's go to the next package folder. So we've kind of just been messing with our contract and our deploy script, but let's also go into the Next.js folder. Let's go to the app folder, and we can see here there's the main page. And if we go to down further, there's a scaffold-config.ts, which is right here. Now, this has all of the settings for Scaffold-ETH, like the Alchemy API key, the target network, the polling interval. So we want to change this to Sepolia. So there we go. We can see because the types show up, and we could lower the interval to, we could do it to 1,000 milliseconds or something like that and save it. And then we can go ahead and check our front end. So let's go back and hit refresh. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that we get kicked out of that burner wallet because we don't really want to use a burner wallet if we are on a test net or a main net, because there could be some issues with the contract. So we want to connect our wallet, and this time we'll use MetaMask and hit sign or connect. And then there we go. So our contract should be deployed now and showing up in Etherscan. There it is. So we have here where we created the contract, and then we have where we transferred the ownership. So we deployed it, then we called the transfer ownership in the deploy, and then we transferred that ownership of the contract. So the contract is actually owned by my burner wallet. That's okay. We could have probably put my main Ethereum address in there, but we didn't do that, but that's okay. So now we have the contract deployed. So now we should be able to change the greeting on Sepolia. So let's do that. WaveHack and hit enter and hit send. Now what this is going to do is it's going to require me that I assign the transaction because we're using MetaMask now. And here we go. So now we can check out the transaction. It's going to show us that it's pending. Once it's kind of mined, it's going to tell you how much gas, right? So, yep, there we go. So now I've successfully signed this transaction on Sepolia, and we're good to go. We've basically deployed our thing. Now, the next thing you'll notice is if we go to the contract, we refresh again, we'll see it should index it in a second. It hasn't shown the transaction there, but that's okay. It will show up in a sec. But under the contract tab, you'll see that the contract is not verified. So we just have the bytecode here. So the next thing we want to do is probably verify our contract. It's just best practice to do that. Well, there's a command for that. So you can do yarn verify -- network Sepolia. And what that's going to do is it's basically going to compile the contract. It's going to send the source code and the anything that's in the constructor to Etherscan, and then it's going to compile it and compare it to the bytecode to make sure that they match, and then it's going to verify it, which it just did. So now if I come over here and hit refresh, we'll have the verified contract, and we can see that here's my source code where I changed it to cool apps, and yeah, everything's working. So now we can go here to the contract, and we can see that it's been deployed. We can also go up here to the transactions and see that there's our transaction. So this is where we actually updated the greeting. We did the set greeting function, right? So everything's working great. So at this point, you probably would want to push your front end to a website. So there's a built-in function for Vercel. So you can do a yarn Vercel :YOLO, which means you only live once. Which is so funny, but it's just ignores some errors basically that you might get. You might want to not do this in production, but it'll ignore some like build errors and allow you to deploy it. And this is going to basically package up and deploy it. So it's going to ask you if you want to deploy it. Yes. What project do you want to use? You'll need to sign in to Vercel if you want to do this. Do you want to link it to the existing project found? We say no. No, and then what's the project name? So we'll call it WaveHack test. Hit enter. It's going to ask you where the directory is. Hit enter. Now it's going to bundle it up for you, ship it off. It's going to ask you if you want to modify any of the settings, which we're just going to use the defaults, and it's going to upload the app for us. So we can kind of come back to that. But the next thing I want to talk about briefly is the front end stuff a little bit more. So if we come in here, we'll see that there's a components folder. And we have the header, which is the burner wallet and all the stuff you see at the top. We have the footer, and then we have like the Scaffold-ETH components. So there's a handful of components and hooks that are available in Scaffold-ETH that make it easy for you to do things like create an address input, or to just display an address using ENS lookup, or if you want to get the balance of a contract, right? So there's all these existing hooks that are available to us. And if we look at one of them here on the page, we can kind of see how we import them. So we can see here that we can import the components and what we want to use. So like we could import balance here if we wanted to, or address input, and they're all types. So you can just start typing and it will kind of tell you, which one you want to use. So that's really useful. And then there's also the hooks that are available. So all of this stuff is documented. If you go to the main scaffold-eth.io, you can go to docs, and you can come here. You can go through the quick start, which I kind of just walked through, and then there's two sections that you need to know. One is all the components. So there's an address component just to do ENS resolution of a particular address. There's a balance component, which will look up what the user's balance is. There's an input component. So if you type in an ENS name, it will automatically resolve that to the address. And it will also create the little blocky dude that you see, the little icon. There's also an Ether input that'll allow you to convert back and forth between ETH and USD and some other stuff here. And then there's hooks that allow you to do different things. So let's say you want to read from a contract. So these are examples of how you would create data for a particular read function. So in this case, we have the contract name, what the actual function name is, and what the arguments are that need to be passed. And then there's a write function as well, which allows you to do things like set a greeting, right? And pass in some arguments in the greeting, or maybe send in some value on the transaction. And then there's like error catching as well. So this will allow you to, like in this case, it's a button that allows you to set a greeting just by clicking that and then passing in whatever you want. And then you can combine this with, use state to basically have an input, and then someone could type in some input, and then you could set the greeting. So really easy documentation to follow along for all these things. You can also subscribe to events, and you can also get like more detailed contract info and just look up information for the contract as well. So there's a lot of information that you can do. And then the last thing is there's like a recipes section that show you like how to do different things. So like, how do you get the balance of a connected account? How do you write to a contract with a write contract? So there's a full example here that will show you exactly what you need to do and walk you through it. So really useful stuff, especially if you're not a front-end developer. I remember when I first got started, it was very hard to write front-end stuff. So all the docs are really good. And then, yeah, the GitHub is here. So if you want to get more information about, the source code, there's a lot of the stuff I just walked through and what the requirements are all here. And yeah, there's a main link to the website, which is just here. And I think if you come down here on the bottom, there's this support right here, support. So that's really useful because it's going to open up a link to the Telegram chat for Scaffold-ETH. So if you get lost and you need help, go in there. There's about 2,000 developers in there, and they will kind of help you out. So let's see if our thing deployed. It did. So now we have a full-blown app that is available, and we can go to that. And I think it's going to let me just go. Not sure if I have it set up to public. If it doesn't, it might want me to log in, yeah, which is okay because I'm not on the right account here. But if you logged into Vercel, then you'd be able to browse the site, and then you'd be able to publish it and make it public facing. Okay, so from this point, we were able to build out an app, make some changes, change the deploy script. We ripped out the access control that was built in and implemented Open Zeppelin, and we deployed it, and we updated our front end a little bit. We didn't do too much. If you're going to make changes to your front end, I would recommend that you do it inside of this main page here. So let's say you want to just like gut out what's kind of in here. You could just grab all this stuff basically and say, create your app here like this and save that. And basically, this is kind of where you'd build your app. So, keep the header. You could maybe get rid of the footer unless you want to have the light mode toggle. And, you could probably pick apart some of these components, but build your app inside this middle section in that main page and use all of the hooks and the components inside of here. And then you can start doing interesting stuff with your app and then keep all of the functionality that comes with Scaffold-ETH. So I hope that was useful. If you guys do get lost or you guys have any issues, please feel free to join the Telegram chat, ask for support. We're here to help you. If you have any problems at all, just reach out, and good luck hacking. I'll catch you guys next time.